For 4 years, Russia's Black Sea Fleet has followed a single strategy in the face of Ukrainian attacks: retreat. When its historic home port of Sevastopol fell within range of Ukrainian missiles and drones, the fleet fled east to Novorossiysk, a base Moscow treated as its last safe harbor on the Black Sea. On the night of August 12th, that final refuge went up in flames. In an operation President Volodymyr Zelensky called unique, Ukraine combined nearly its entire domestically built long-range arsenal into a single coordinated strike. Paralyzing jet-powered missile drones, Neptune anti-ship cruise missiles, and unmanned naval strike vessels were launched together against one target for the first time. The targets sat more than 300 kilometers from the front line, in a city Russia had assumed was beyond Ukraine's reach. Kyiv did not disclose the total number of weapons used in the strike. Russian officials claimed to have intercepted a portion of the incoming drones. But as with most Russian air defense claims, the real story was not in what Moscow said it stopped. It was in what it failed to stop. Ukraine's general staff confirmed that 4 Russian warships were damaged in the attack. 2 of them were Grigorovich-class frigates, the Admiral Essen and the Admiral Makarov, vessels equipped with vertical launch cells capable of firing Kalibr cruise missiles, the same weapons Russia has used repeatedly to strike Ukrainian cities. A Bayan-M-class missile corvette and a Vasily Bykov-class patrol ship were also hit. These were not minor vessels sitting idle in port. They were among the most valuable strike assets the Black Sea Fleet had left. Ships capable of launching long-range missiles against Ukrainian territory from the relative safety of Russian waters. The damage did not stop at the warships. Ukrainian strikes hit air defense positions protecting the base, piers used to service the fleet, and infrastructure across the seaport itself. Satellite fire detection data showed blazes breaking out near the Cheskhery's oil terminal, one of the largest crude export points on Russia's Black Sea coast, as well as near the naval base and nearby fuel storage tanks. Cheskhery serves as the endpoint for major Russian pipelines and normally moves hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil a day toward export tankers. Even a temporary disruption there carries consequences far beyond the military sphere. Novorossiysk is not only a naval base, it is one of Russia's most important grain export hubs, and the strike forced immediate consequences there as well. 2 of the port's largest grain terminals suspended operations in the aftermath of the attack. Together, those terminals handle well over 15 million metric tons of grain exports a year. Industry sources told international reporters that both facilities halted work to assess damage, a disruption that ripples outward into global food markets given Russia's position as the world's largest wheat exporter. Russian authorities acknowledged that the fighting reached beyond the port itself. The governor of Krasnodar region reported that debris from intercepted drones fell across more than 20 residential buildings and several enterprises in the city, triggering emergency response operations. Local officials confirmed civilian casualties from the barrage of air defense fire and falling wreckage, a reminder that even strikes aimed squarely at military infrastructure carry consequences for the people living around it. What makes this attack different from earlier strikes on Russian naval assets is the weaponry behind it. Every system used in the Novorossiysk operation, the Paralyzing, the Neptune, and the naval drones, was designed and built inside Ukraine. None of it came from Western stockpiles, and none of it was bound by the restrictions foreign governments have historically placed on how their donated weapons could be used. For years, Ukraine's ability to strike deep into Russian territory was constrained by what its allies would permit. That constraint no longer applies to a growing share of Kyiv's strike capability. The Paralyzing missile drone itself represents the clearest evidence of that shift. First used against Russian territory in August of 2024, the Paralyzing is a domestically developed jet-powered weapon with a range of roughly 600 kilometers. putting dozens of Russian airfields and logistics hubs within reach from Ukrainian launch sites. Paired with the Neptune, originally built as an anti-ship weapon and later adapted for long-range land attack missions, and a growing fleet of unmanned surface vessels that have already forced the Russian Navy to abandon Crimea entirely, Ukraine now possesses a genuinely independent long-range strike capability, one it can deploy without waiting on permission from Washington, London, or Berlin. For Russia, the strategic problem this creates has no easy solution. The Black Sea Fleet has already been pushed once, from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk, and there is nowhere obvious left to run. Moving surviving vessels further east would mean threading them through the narrow Kerch Strait, a choke point Ukraine has targeted before. Concentrating additional air defense at Novorossiysk raises the cost of protecting a port that also houses civilian infrastructure and export terminals tied to Russia's wartime economy. And eliminating the drone and missile threat at its source would require striking launch sites deep inside Ukrainian territory, an escalation Moscow has so far been either unable or unwilling to achieve. Ukraine's message with this strike was unambiguous. The distance that once made Novorossiysk feel untouchable no longer guarantees safety. As Zelensky put it in the aftermath of the attack, the occupying fleet and everything that supports it will not be safe as long as Russian aggression against Ukraine continues. For years into the war, the Black Sea Fleet has run out of places to hide. This is not an isolated success. It is the latest chapter in a campaign that has already reshaped the naval balance of the entire war. When the invasion began in 2022, Russia's Black Sea Fleet operated with near total freedom, blockading Ukrainian ports, launching cruise missiles at will, and treating the sea as exclusively its own. That advantage collapsed step by step. Ukraine sank the fleet's flagship, the Moskva, within the war's first months. Ukrainian sea drones then began hunting individual warships across the western Black Sea, forcing Russian commanders to keep their most valuable vessels tied to port rather than risk them at sea. By the summer of 2024, the last Russian warship still based in occupied Crimea had been withdrawn, ending Moscow's use of the peninsula as a functioning naval hub entirely. That retreat to Novorossiysk was supposed to be the fleet's answer to Ukraine's growing reach. For a time, it worked. The city sat far enough from the front line, and far enough from Ukrainian-controlled coastline, that Russian commanders believed their remaining frigates, corvettes, and submarines could operate from there with relative impunity. The August 12th strike ended that assumption in a single night, proving that distance alone is no longer a defense against a country that has learned to build its own long-range weapons rather than wait for them. Acting Defense Minister Yevgeny Kamara summed up Ukraine's intent plainly in the aftermath of the operation. The goal is to systematically dismantle the infrastructure sustaining Russia's war machine, from the fleet itself to the logistics, fuel, and energy networks that keep it running. Novorossiysk was not treated as a final target. It was treated as proof of concept, evidence that no facility supporting the invasion of Ukraine, however far from the front line, can be considered permanently out of reach.